All right, folks, welcome to another Buckmasters podcast. And I tell you what, I got a good friend, a legend in fishing, but my mentor from way back, taught me how to do commercials, everything. My buddy Bill Dance, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Jackie, it's always good to be with you, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. Well, you've been doing it a lot longer than me, and Lord willing, I hope I can do it as long as you've been doing it.
Oh, you will. You got it in you. I can tell.
The only problem is you're fishing in your 80s. I don't know if I'm going to sit in a tree stand 35 foot up off the ground when I'm in my 80s. That's the only thing I was thinking about.
I hadn't thought of that. You're going to get an automatic lift uh, to get you up in the tree.
They
Didn't
do
you fall
make.
out? Didn't you fall out of a tree and hurt your leg one time? Was that you or?
No, I
Oh,
didn't.
I know who. I think it was Harold Knight, I believe.
Yes, Harold did fall out of a tree. So
Yeah.
I'm knock on wood. I've been very lucky. They got all these safety things they put us in now. God bless them, and so I've been good. Well, let's get going. We got a lot to talk about. You and I go way back.
Yep.
For the folks that don't know who Bill Dance is, they ain't paying attention. Bill, tell everybody where you're from, where you grew up, and a little bit about your family before we jump into the fishing stuff.
Well, I've been blessed. I've had uh, as far back as I can remember, my granddaddy, my grandmother uh, played a major role in my life and what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I've got, I met a girl, a blind date, and I ended up marrying my blind date.
Really?
Yeah, and she was from Tennessee. Uh, I've got three boys. They were born in Tennessee. Uh, Pamela, my daughter, was born in Tennessee. I caught my first fish in Tennessee. My biggest largemouth came from Tennessee. My biggest smallmouth came from Tennessee. Uh, I started a TV show in Memphis, Tennessee. Uh, Great day. I don't know. Tennessee, um, everything centers around me, centers around Tennessee. So don't talk Alabama or Auburn.
I wasn't
No, I
going to
know.
say anything.
Hey,
I wasn't going to
we're on
say
a.
anything.
Ah,
Okay. I wasn't going to say anything. So
well, if you wear that much, all your hair will fall out.
I know it might already fallen out. So, well, who got you started fishing? I mean, because my granddaddy got me going. Who got you going fishing?
My granddaddy. So my daddy was a doctor. My granddaddy was a doctor. My great great was a doctor, and my great 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 was a doctor. But my
Really?
granddaddy, being a doctor, I learned a lot about. I could throw a rock from my granddaddy's front porch into Mulberry Creek,
Mm-hmm.
and I grew up wading the creek, and I was on that creek every single day. Uh, my granddaddy didn't teach me as much about technique, a little bit, how to cast a casting rod, but how to fish a creek, where how fish see
Mm-hmm.
and how fish hear, and always fish up the creek. But always be sure that you're above a cattle crossing before you do. But that's supposed to be funny, Jackie.
Oh, I'm sitting here trying to figure out if I'm going to choke on that thing or drink some more Mountain Dew.
Yeah, never fish below a pig crossing or a cattle crossing in a creek. But Mulberry Creek was fed by many springs, and it had smallmouth in it, uh, black perch, which is rock bass,
Right.
red eyes, and bluegill, catfish. Uh, but it was a creek where I learned to fish, moving water especially. But with the help of my granddaddy of teaching me of shadows, it spook fish.
Mm-hmm.
Always try to walk slowly uh, up through gravel areas because fish could detect the sound that was unnatural to them.
Sure.
And then how fish see. And a lot of that has helped me tremendously over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'll never forget. I used to go up on the square in Lynchburg, and population was 399. Moore County was the smallest county in Tennessee. And I knew everybody on the square. But Connor Motlow owned the hardware store. And back in those days, we didn't have Bass Pros, Walmarts, or Academies, Dick's. The only place you could buy a fishing tackle was at a hardware store. Well, I went in there one time to get some sinkers and hooks. An old fellow that ran it, his name was, everybody called him Tosh. And I'd always look in that glass case. And he says, "What do you keep looking at that glass case for?" And I said, that lure right there. And he said, "Let me get it out." And he handed it to me. And I looked at it and I said, "Good gracious." The lure was made in 34. I don't know if that particular bait was made in 34. But anyway, I looked at it and I said, "Can I take it out of the box?" And he said, "Yeah." And I took it out of the box and I looked at it and put it back in the box, gave it back to him. And I said, it was 75 cents. That's what that lure cost.
Yeah.
Well, I'll try to fast forward this. This went on for several months. Every time I run to the square, I want to go look at that lure. And I said, one of these days I'm going to buy that lure and I don't sell it. So I'd asked my granddaddy, I said, is there anything I can do to make some money? And he said, "Yeah, you can rake the yard or do this or that." I said, "Okay." Well, I never got around to raking the yard. Instead of doing this, I was doing that.
Right.
Fishing in the creeks. But anyway, I came in one day, or I was on the creek. My grandmother used to take a pan and beat it with a wooden spoon. Mm-hmm. And I better be close enough to hear that because she served dinner,
sure,
which we call lunch now, at 11:30 sharp. And I'd better be there for dinner or for lunch. We had supper at night, and dinner was at noon, and breakfast was in the early morning. So anyway, I said, she said, the town's going to close up. Every Wednesday afternoon, the town would close up. Everybody they'd go fishing or they'd go work in their garden or they'd go mow their yard or relax or do something. But the square just closed down. And so we'd always fish. We'd go fishing that afternoon. So grandmother would load up her quilt that she sat on. And she told me, she said, she was getting it out. She said, "Look, Granddaddy's going to a big lake today instead of the creek." And I went, "Oh, really?" And I thought, golly, I wish I had that. She said, "Look," she reached in her apron pocket and she had her bunny coins in a handkerchief. You remember how?
Oh, yeah.
She took three silver quarters out of the handkerchief. She said, "Take this and run as fast as you can and get that bug lure that you've been wanting from Tosh." I ran like a gazelle. I mean, I was breeze fast, just boom.
Yeah.
I ran in and I said, Tosh, look, here's 75 cents. He said, "Here's your lure." I took the lure, and I had a little old metal rod made by True Temper, but I had a little Shakespeare reel, a 1940D reel with braided line. And I'd take a section of catgut that Cortland made and tie it on to the braid. And we called it catgut back then, but they call it monofilament today. Mm-hmm. And we drove up to a lake about 12 miles from Lynchburg called Cumberland Springs Lake. And grandmother took 2 double cola bottles and tied them together and pitched them right there. A little spring came into the lake there. She pitched the double colas in the cold water and then had a little jug of drinking water. She put it in the spring. Granddaddy baited up. He liked to fish for red ears. Mm-hmm. So he baited up and made a cast, and he had it sitting there. So I took off and I walked down about 50, 75 yards through a bunch of bushes, and I came out on a point. And the first thing I looked at, I said, "Good night, what is that?" And there were 2 bass swimming along, one about 2.5 and one about 1.5 pounds. And I went, good night. And I took that little old rod and I went quick, 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 tried to, I'm going to make a false cast, but I didn't. And I let it fly and it hit the water about 20 feet, 15 to 20 feet in front of those two bass swimming in that direction. And I looked at them. When the bait hit the water, they stopped. And I said, what caused them to stop? They can't see the bait, but they heard that. They heard it.
Right.
And I know they, I'll tell you why I know they heard it. I started moving the bait across the surface. The fish moved to it in that direction. I'd stop, they'd stop. I'd start the bait up, they'd start. I'd stop, they'd stop. I'd start, they'd start. I'd stop, they'd stop. And I got it within about 30 feet of the bank. And all of a sudden, that bigger bass went boom. He just shot out of it, just shoom, and hit that lure. And I reared back and started reeling, backing up, backing up, backing up. And the other bass was swimming right with him, trying to take the bait. I did double hit it. And finally, it turned off. And I kept reeling. This little cranking rod I had, that little metal rod. But the metal rod was amazing. It had a lot of action to it. So I got that fish within about 6 feet of the bank. And he took off again. And I was playing, as far as a drag system, the drag system was your thumb.
Right.
So I let it slip. I said, don't let him get off. I'll be good. I'll tell the truth next week, dear Lord. Please don't let me lose this fish. And I finally got him up about a foot, and I just grabbed the line, and I just took off running up the bank. And I pulled him up on the bank, and I ran back down and grabbed him, took the lure out of his mouth, and shot back through the yucca plants or whatever they were, and I ran up to my granddad and grandmother, and I was hollering, screaming. She said, my grandmother said, Paul, that's little Billy. Is he okay? If something's wrong? And I shoom, out of the bushes I came. I said, look what I just caught. Look what I just caught. And Granddad said, oh, isn't that something? Grandmother said, oh, my goodness. And I said, I'm going to put him in the back seat, and I'm going to put that other quilt on top of it. And Granddad said, no, let me have it. He had a chain stringer.
Oh, yeah.
So he hooked him. And I said, put another one of those clips in his mouth. He said, he won't get off. He'll be fine. So he pitched him in the water. And he said, where's your rod and stuff? I said, I don't know. I think it's back down there on that point. I went back down there to get it. And the whole time I was walking down there, I was thinking, what just happened here? What just happened? Those fish heard that bait. And my granddaddy told me about hearing was a major part.
Yeah.
One of the key senses in a bass. And the other side, the other one's side.
Right.
And I started to remember what he said. And I know without a doubt, the sound, they heard that sound all the way until that fish got within 2 feet of it. And he just blasted it. But
so that was your learning tips from your granddaddy and buying that lure.
About anatomy, about the fish's anatomy, And I know without a doubt in my mind that was a turning point in my life. It just something I said, I can't believe that I lured this fish out of his water into mine, out of his world into my world.
Right.
And he hit a bait that was made out of wood at that time with a metal lip and two hooks. And you'd never guess what that bait was.
What was it?
A jitterbug.
Really?
That was the first. Yeah. And they still make the jitterbug today.
Absolutely.
I think it sells for like $6.50, $7.
Right.
I don't know. But back then it was only 75 cents. But that one moment really changed my direction. I just could not believe. I said, I don't know how it's going to happen, but I pray to the good Lord. I want to be where I can I'm involved in fishing
Yeah.
somewhere because I said I want to devote my life to this because uh, either being a biologist, uh, being a salesman,
Mm-hmm.
selling fishing tackle, whatever. I needed to stay intact with fishing.
Yeah.
And as prayers would have it, I eventually worked my way into a position to where I've been on all four corners of uh, this wonderful life,
Oh, yeah.
from promoting fishing lures to helping design and test fishing lures for major companies,
Right.
to owning a tackle company. I owned 50% of Strike King at one time,
Wow.
and then working on the next corner of being able to uh, show it on radio or talk it on radio, and
Mm-hmm.
or even show it on television.
Right.
So it was uh, it
Well,
was a dream come true.
that's a perfect segue to the person I want to talk about because this person helped you get started, but he sure helped me. And that's our buddy Ray Scott.
Oh, isn't that great picture of him?
Yeah. And
I kept that magazine. I
so,
wouldn't, and you wouldn't. I know I wouldn't, and I know you
yeah.
wouldn't be where we are today if it hadn't been for Ray Scott. Ray was a great friend, and
Yep.
oh, I could tell you so many funny stories about him.
But he
Uh,
sent you a letter, right, for the first fishing tournament? Is that I was trying to see what the story was. I remember he was telling me back and forth of how he's trying to get tournaments started and, sent you a
well,
letter out.
I tell you how that happened. I tell you two things that happened. Um, I was on Pickwick Lake, way back yonder,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in a little 14-foot flat bottom boat with a little 20-horse Mercury on the back of it. And Diane was with me. And I worked out toward this point uh, there down by the dam in Slate Rock Creek. And I saw this big boat, a skeeter boat, a left side skeeter. You remember those skeeters they made?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was coming right in toward the creek. There was a no wake sign. And I saw the guy running the motor was Ed House, who was PR for TWRA, Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency. And in the middle of the boat, I recognized uh, the guy in the middle of the boat was Glenn Andrews. And Glenn was the best fisherman I ever met in my life. He was absolutely. Uh, if Jimmy Houston was here right now, I'd say who's the best fisherman you ever met, Glenn Andrews.
Mm-hmm.
If Roland was here, who's the best bass fisherman you ever met, Glenn Andrews.
Mm-hmm.
He was just uncanny. But they pulled up, and in front of the boat was Ray Scott. Now I had communicated with Ray uh, about his first tournament on Beaver Lake in Northwest Arkansas, and he started promoting the tournaments. And I'm sitting there talking, and by the time he had to take a breath, Glenn cut in and said, how have you done this morning? How well have you done? I said, oh, we've caught 4 or 5. Of course, there were dinks. But he said, I said, how'd y'all do? He said, he looked back at Ed and he said, how many fish we catch? And he said, about 15. And what's the biggest? And we had a couple of 6-pound bass. And I said, you what? You what? This morning you caught 2 6-pounders and 15? He said, yeah. What you need to do is, I'll tell you where we caught them. We caught them in Dry Creek. You know where that big gravel point comes out? And I said, yeah. There's a stump field in behind it. He said, well, that's too shallow. You need to come on out and around 24 to 27 feet. I said, what? And he said, keep your boat in about 27 to 28 feet. And I said, and throw shallow? He said, no, just throw straight in the same depth of water. And I said, you caught those fish how deep? And he said, about 24, 25 feet. I said, are you serious? You caught bass that deep? And he said, yeah. Well, I grew up fishing the Mississippi River oxbows, and if my bait got in 10 feet of water, it'd get the bends of pulling it in. And I thought 4 feet was deep for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, really? And he said, yeah. He said, this point you're coming up on, it's a creek channel point. I said, what? What is a creek channel point? And he says, where the creek turns off of this point, and it's a turnout. If you'll ease up there, how heavy a sinker you got on? I said, oh, I think a quarter. He said, put a 3/8 on. And when you get right out there, make a long cast straight off that point toward the dam. And I said, okay. And I reared back. Finally, he said, y'all want us for breakfast? I looked at Diane. She said, that's fine. And we've got a couple of stops. Why don't we meet you at the Botel in about an hour and a half? That was a big river boat down below Tennessee Tail Race Waters, below the dam. And so I put that 3/8 sinker on, and I eased up there, and I went, choom. They left. The time I got tied on and everything, got the sinker and everything, I put the worm on and went, choom, fired it out. And I said, and 17 and 18 and 19 and 20 and 21 and 22. The bait was on the bottom, falling about a foot per second.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, golly. And I went boop, 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 and something went boop, boop, boop. And I went, what was that boop, boop, boop? To myself. And I went boop, boop, boop. And I felt it go boop, boop, boop. And my rod tip went down, and I just reeled. And I felt him pulling. He jumped up out of the water, and I said, good gosh, look at that. And I got him up beside the boat, and I grabbed him. And I said, Diane, look, did you see what just happened? And she said, yeah, you caught a bass. I said, no, I did. But did you just see how deep I caught that fish? Look at that. That fish came out of 24 feet of water. I feel like I was in the ocean if I fished 24 feet, growing up. And I said, I can't believe that. And I said, can you believe it? And she said, I believe it because I just saw it. So I threw it back. I went to him, threw it back. I caught another one about 2 pounds. And then threw back a couple of times. And I caught another one about 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds. And I went, golly. And I knew this big tournament was coming up on a Highland Reservoir in northwest Arkansas. And I said, I have got to do one thing right now. I've got 2 months before that tournament. This was springtime. I said, I have got to do something that I don't know how to do, but I'm going to try. I've got to change the way I fish. I've got to do that if I'm going to fish some of these tournaments. And it wasn't a lake like Eufaula or a lake like Ross Barnett or Rayburn, but I got real scared and real just upset about it. I said, I don't know how to fish deep water. I don't know how to fish deep water.
Was this going to be your first fishing tournament?
Yeah.
Was this Ray's first fishing tournament, or already had?
Yeah, not Ray's first fishing tournament at Beaver Lake.
Okay, so this is your first. I got you.
Yeah, I said, I've got to learn how to fish deep water.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I could think about. And there was one source I figured it could teach me a lot about deep water. And we met Ray, Glenn, and Ed down at the Botel for breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at Glenn and I said, Glenn, I did what you said, fishing that point. But I can't believe that a bass keep going. He said, I've caught him 60, 65 feet deep on Table Rock and Bull Shoals. And I said, what? And I said, oh, good gracious. And so anyway, we talked. I was trying every way in the world, and Ray wouldn't shut up. He said, now this tournament, Bill, we're going to such and all this. I said, yeah, I know it, Ray. I'm going to fish that tournament. Yeah. And I said, Glenn. And Ray said, I said, shut up, Ray. Let me talk to Glenn. I wanted to talk to Glenn because, I mean, everything he said was just over my head. But I said, I'm going to get it down here shoulder high. Sure. I'm going to learn something about deep fishing. I'm going to learn. And he's going to teach me. is Glenn Andrews.
I'll be
So
now.
I got his telephone number, and I said, "You mind if I call you?" Not at all. So anyway, uh, I called Glenn and I was asking questions, and he said, "Well, have you got a depth finder?" And I said, "No, what's that?" And he said, "So I found one. Carl Lawrence sent me one. Had a
Really?
little green box,
Uh-huh.
and I turned it on, and all the red lights going, and I had to try to tune it down. I didn't know if it was a bush or a school of fish I was looking at, but
Mm-hmm.
I threw at it anyway. But he told me, get you a topo map and get the smallest intervals that you could get. So the U.S. Geological, they had a 20-foot interval map, and there was a place in Knoxville, Tennessee, recreational properties. They had a map of Pickwick with 5-foot intervals with 2.5-foot auxiliary intervals. So it showed the
Sure.
tight lines, where the quicker drops were.
Yeah.
The tighter your interval lines run, they all start running close together, you've got deep water. So I started just looking and looking and looking. And I didn't have cell phones then, but I'd make notes, and I could see it on the map. There's a creek right here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd run it out as best I could. And then I had a line compass. I could point and take two 90-degree, fixes on an object,
Mm-hmm.
just one this way and one that way. It may be a big white tree, oak tree, and directly behind it, way up on the hill, was a red barn. Then I'd look 90 degrees of that, and here was the end of the concrete on the dam.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had some Mountain Dew bottles, or 7-Up bottles, I don't remember what, and I fill them halfway full, and I plug the bottle and put a mono uh, around the bottle, and I drop it right there, and the bottle would stand up about like this, and it wasn't
Right.
about that much visibility
Mm-hmm.
on that bottle. Well, I knew exactly where it was then.
Mm-hmm.
And Glenn said, always name the spot. Always name the spot. And I said, okay, number 1, 7-Up. And
Yeah.
then number 2, whatever it was, uh,
Yeah.
7-Up, number 2, number 3. Well, I started then learning how to fish deep water. And when I
Mm-hmm.
went to Beaver, Glenn said, tell you what you do. Wherever the water meets, the land meets the water, the contour doesn't change. It continues on out.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to find where it drops off. And I said, okay. Well, I started looking, and I went up in a cove, and first day of practice, and I looked, and I said, what is that? And I could see the timber going right straight out, right up on the bank. And I said, it's got to be a road bed. And so I just turned, I had a slip single worm on, the old flip tail worm, if you remember those.
Mm-hmm.
And I threw it, and I counted it down 17 feet where it finally settled. And I went, boop, boop, boom, one hit it. And I went, oh, I reeled him in. Well, on another rod, I had a slip sinker rig, but I had the hook. I could bend it back and just put the worm on it where if the fish hit it, he could just tear the worm off where I wouldn't hook the fish.
Mm-hmm.
And so I picked that rod up and I threw it, and one went boom, and I just let him pull the rod down. He pulled the worm off, and I put another worm on. I went, do it back. He pulled that worm off. And I said, right here, just because this roadbed hits the water, it doesn't stop. It
Mm-hmm.
continues on out. So
Right.
I looked across the other way, and I could see where it was going out on the other side of the cove. Well, I tried it, and I didn't do it no good.
Mm-hmm.
So going along, I saw where this bluff ended, and I got in it, and it was about, I don't know, 60 feet, 65 feet of water. And all of a sudden, it was 65 and went, it was a channel point off of a bluff.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran around on it, looking around. I could see stuff on that, all that red flashing. And I said, that might be a bass. So I threw out. 17 feet, boop, caught a bass. 17 feet, boop, caught a bass. So I left it. And then I ran up the lake a little ways and I was looking at everything on the banks, the end of a tree line, a bluff. And I got on that bluff on one place and I started down the bluff and I came out of 65 feet of water up on part of a ledge that ran, maybe 25, 30 yards. And then I just idling real slow and then it went, boom, it dropped off again into about 65 feet. And as luck would have it, it was 17 feet deep on that big flat rock or that shelf that came out. So I turned around, I made a long cast, went down to caught a fish. Threw back with my fake hook, nothing hit it. Pulled it off, tried it again, made 3 casts officially. Well, I went on that day and I found that day and the next day, I found 7 spots. 7. And the morning of the tournament, Glenn always try to find you a good spot close to the takeoff, the weigh-in area, the takeoff and the weigh-in area. Glenn told me that. So I said, okay. I had Troy Anderson from Little Rock as a partner. And he said, well, I hadn't done any good in practice. I hope you have. And I said, well, I found some fish. And all the boats were lined up. Ray Mursky in Dallas had a 50-horse Mercury. And I had a 50-horse on my boat. We had 2 glass boats.
How many fishermen were in this first tournament, Bill?
106.
Ray got 106 people in the first tournament.
Yeah, I believe it was 106.
Wow.
And but I didn't let that worry me because Glenn said, you ain't got but one person to beat.
Yeah.
And that's the guy in first place.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. He said, don't worry about what you hear. Just do your thing. I never forgot that. And so I'm sitting way over here on the left. And Ray rolled out with his little flare gun. And boom, we said a morning prayer and then went, boom, shot it. And all the boats started out. Well, I just went, boom, and just ran 50 yards and eased up into this creek. And I ran to the front of the boat. And as I was moving up the front of the boat, I went, picked my rod up, and went, made a cast on that logging road. I dropped the trolling motor, hit it in reverse, just backed up. When I lifted up on the rod, I said, I got one. First cast, I reeled up and I whipped him over in the boat. And he was about 2.5 pounds. And I looked and I could see the bridge. And all the boats hadn't even gotten to the bridge except one, and that was Mursky, because he had that 50-horse. Some of them were running little 25s, small boats, small engine, flat bottom boats. And anyway, I caught about 7 there, and I said, Troy, I don't want to beat this thing. I don't want to beat it down because I may need it tomorrow. He said, I understand. But I said, I think we can get a limit with what I know. So I shot to the next spot.
So what was the limit, Bill, in this first tournament? 10. Okay. 10.
He caught 3 and I caught 3. And all the fish were right. They run from £1.75 pounds to 3 pounds. Well, I wasn't going to just sit there and just cherry pick them until I caught a 3-pounder because I needed that. I might need that spot.
Was this catch and release, or this was before catch and release?
You had to bring them in.
All right, you put them in the boat, and they went home to the frying pan. I got you.
Right, and I ran to my ledge, and we caught 3 or 4, and I caught one about 4 pounds. And I said, Troy, you got a limit? I got a limit. Let's just go look for fish the rest of the day, new spots. And I looked across, and I knew there was a flat out there and on the graph. But those were bushes or baby cedars or something. But the bass were in there. The bass were in about 17 feet on this flat. So in practice, I made a couple of casts there, and I caught a couple of 2 or 3 fish. And I caught one, and then I threw back with a funny hook. But anyway, we went to the weigh-in. We found a couple of other places, and we went to the weigh-in. And as luck would have it, I was in first place.
Really? Out
And
of 106?
yeah, and Troy told Ray, he said he caught the very first bass. He caught the very first bass in this tournament. And Ray said, "You did?" I said, "I don't know. Did I?" And Troy said, "I saw all the boats except one running." And
How about that?
it wasn't a, a, a minute and a half. I had the first fish in the boat. But anyway, I started really building a lot of confidence in deep water.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I had to do that. In the next tournament we went to was Smith Lake in Alabama.
So did you win that first tournament?
No, I finished second.
Second. So the
And,
second
and
day you fishing, but you ended up coming in second. Wow.
yeah, Stan Sloan beat me by a pound or something. And he was a good fisherman, lived in Nashville, fished Kentucky Lake a lot.
But Mr. Andrews was your coach, bottom line, right?
No question. And I called him. He didn't show me where to fish, but he taught me how
to fish. Yeah.
And we put him in the Hall of Fame last year, and it was the biggest highlight of his life. But
well, that's awesome. So how many tournaments did you do right at first? What was your first year? How many total tournaments did you do?
Well, I fished every one of them. The next one was at Smith Lake, and it was a deep, deep, clear lake. And two gulls showed me the hot spot,
really?
a hot spot. And I had only 3 jigging spoons to my name in my tackle box.
Mm-hmm.
And I moved out to where those gulls were. And at 50 feet, I saw the top of a big tree.
Mm-hmm.
And you come off the top of it was like 50, and you come off the edge of it, and it'd be like, I don't know, 45 feet or 50 feet. I mean, 45, 40 feet, 35 feet. Mm-hmm. And this tree was just the biggest thing in that area.
Right.
And I saw those gulls flopping around, so I put that jigging spoon on, flipped it out. It went down, and I could feel it hit a limb, and I shook it a little hard, and boom, a bass hit it. And these were spotted bass. Mm-hmm. And I caught, I think 15 was the limit. Yeah, the bass limit was 15. And so I fished it. And
did you win that tournament? Did you win that tournament?
No, finished second.
Well,
and then the next one was at Kentucky Lake. And I caught them on the Tennessee River channel on stump rows where the water was low, and I could see with polarized glasses, I could see those stumps. And I'd throw off to the side of them, down current, and try to bring the bait in on the side instead of having I was using a jig and pork back then. And that's where I caught my fish. And Billy Phillips lived in Jackson, Tennessee. He fished it all the time, and he won that tournament. But it was close again. Mm-hmm. So the next tournament was at Ross Barnett. And I fished that tournament, and I won it. And I won it deep.
Really?
I found, they were, I'd say fish were 16 to 20 feet. And I found some actual road beds that came up. Mm-hmm. I knew how to read the map and what to look for, and high spots out in the middle of the lake. So I ended up limiting, and it was, I don't know if it was 10 or 15 fish, but anyway, the next tournament, I went to Sam Rayburn Reservoir in Texas, and I found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spots, and they were loaded. Mm-hmm. I mean, fish were loaded. And so the morning of the tournament, I had Mr. J.D. Gray from Atlanta, and he didn't have a place to stay when he got to the tournament. He didn't make reservations. And they said, well, you're not going to have a room till uh, tomorrow night. So I said, well, why don't you just stay with me? And he said, well, I really appreciate that. And I said, that's okay. So he was my partner, but we roomed together that first night. Mm-hmm. And we got up that next morning, and he says, I was telling you, I've got a good spot. And I said, you do? He said, yeah. And he said, if you don't mind, I'd like to go there first. And I said, where is it? He said, it's that creek. It's that creek straight across. I said, Coleman Creek? He said, yep, that's it. The first cove in on the left, the right bank going in. It's got a bunch of good bass on it. We pulled in. He put on a dying flutter, a head bait that my great granddaddy fished in one of those old baits. And so I put on a worm, and he threw it out there. Pucka, boom. He catches one about 3 pounds. He said, that's the way to start it off. Told you there's some nice one. He threw it in the live well. And I was throwing a worm. And when you want to catch a fish, you get the fish and the worm so fast. I said, I got to slow down. Mm-hmm. And I started worming. Then I started throwing out this way. Well, we got up to the point. He said, let's go back down that one more time. I said, yes, sir. I'm looking at my watch. 30 minutes had gone by. We got one fish. He's casting, pucka, nothing. He pucketed his way all the way down to where we started. And he said, tell you what, Bill, I know those fish are here. I said, if they are, they're suspended. Mm-hmm. And because you're not getting them on top and I'm not getting them on the bottom. If they're here, they got to be suspended. But I'd throw the worm, that'd fall, and I'd swim it at that depth or close to it. Nothing. So we puckered one more time, and I looked at him. I said, Mr. Gray, it's 9 o'clock. It's after 9. I've got a place where we can limit. I'm almost confident. And he said, well, can we go down that bank one more? I said, no. We'll go to my spot. If it's no good, we'll come back over here and fish it the rest of the day. But is that a deal? He said, that's a deal. So I took off and ran between the Angelina Pass. The Angelina forest was right here, and the Black Forest was right here. Well, I shot through there over on the opposite side of the lake. And I hadn't gone down that far, but I took off up the south side of the lake. And I said, there's the point. There it is right there. And I said, right up in this cove will be a pocket, and there's a sunk pontoon boat there. Pulled in on the bank, pulled up to the spot we threw out, and bang, 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 bang. I caught my limit of 15. He caught his limit of 15. I said, we're leaving it. And I said, let's move right over here, go into this cove. And I hung a good one and caught a nice one, about 4 pounds off that old pontoon boat.
Right.
So I jerked the trolling motor up. He jumped and he cranked the motor. We went into the cove and he said, where is that little pocket you're talking about? And I said, we're supposed to be right here. And I started looking around and I said, go down. Maybe it was the second pocket down there inside that big cove. And I looked and I said, there's no pontoon boat here. I said, turn around and go back out in the lake. He went back out in the lake, and I looked way down the lake, and I went, there's the point way up yonder, about 200 yards. I said, that's where the pontoon is. And he said, did you just pulled up on a point you've never fished before? And I said, no, never have fished it. We both limited out on that point.
That's fun. So how many tournaments, Bill, did you fish that first year?
Well, I won.
Because you come in second on everyone, and you won one on this conversation. So how many more?
No, I won 3.
Won 3. Okay.
Yeah, at Smith Lake,
wow.
Ross Barnett, and Rayburn.
So what was the prize money back in those days? And what year are we talking about?
19, I mean, oh yeah, 19,
Seven.
70, 71,
I was
72.
going to say it had to be 71 or 72. Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, that's about when it was. And
Yeah.
I had that year, I won those three tournaments and I went home.
Is that prize money or is it
Oh
prizes?
no, prize money. Oh man, it was a major payout. If you
Really?
won a tournament, you won $2,000.
Wow. Back in those days, that's a lot of money.
You better believe it. It's 2000. Today, if you're in 50th place, you win 2000.
That's
But
amazing.
anyway,
Well, let's talk a little bit about the transition from the tournaments to television. When did
okay.
you make the decision to make the switch from doing the tournament hardcore into doing entertainment fishing television? Because that's where you and I met.
Yeah. I, well, a little bit happened between then. I was still working for Cream Lure Company. You know, the guy Nick Cream made the first plastic worms,
Mm-hmm.
and I got the idea. If I can do this for Nick, I think I can do it for myself. So I went in Nick's office one morning. I said, Nick, I want to talk to you, and I told him that I wanted to turn in my. He'd furnished me a, a salary making twice what I was making,
Mm-hmm.
and furnished me a company car. And he said, what I want you to do is fish with hardware stores that carry our worms.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we didn't have Bass Pro. Had FW Woolworth and Woolco,
Mm-hmm.
and
I remember those.
it's where you could buy your tackle.
Right.
So anyway, I would take buyers from these department stores
Right.
and hardware stores. And there was a big one called Oshman's in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Toledo Bend, and these people would come in, and I'd show them how to fish the shimmy gal worm. It was
Mm-hmm.
a 7.5 inch worm that Nick made. And I'd entertain them for a day or two. And then another bunch would come in. I might be gone 2 weeks on Toledo Bend
Sure.
and fish in different spots. I could almost guarantee a guy got in the boat, we're going to catch fish right here because I knew they were there.
Right. But
And I
you're
didn't
kind of
beat them.
you're guiding, entertaining for your boss, basically, right?
Right, right. And I just, I did that for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked the phone up. I came home and Charles Spence had called me. We didn't have cell phones. And he says, I'm buying uh, Strike King Lure Company. Well, the guy that owned it was Bill McEwen, and he worked for
Mm-hmm.
American Airlines and was a taxidermist.
Right.
And in my part time, I'd go over and skin ducks, and
Mm-hmm.
he'd pay me $3 if I skin a duck, and all that borax and all that mess on it. And
Mm-hmm.
you're sneezing
Oh
all the
yeah.
time.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
And you walk out there and your nose would be white, and people say, what have you been doing? But I said, been skinning ducks.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, but anyway, they Charles and I started. We took off with Strike King, and I'll back up just about a back up just a little bit
Okay.
and tell you. One night I was over there and we were skinning ducks, and I said, Bill, uh, this was before Bill sold it. I said, you need to. I can sell some of these spinner baits for you, and you don't have to. People would come in and buy six of them, give him $3,
Mm-hmm.
50 cents a piece. I said, no, you need to get where you manufacture them and put them out there. So at that time, I was selling hardware. I was a jobber salesman.
Really?
I would go into these stores and I had a card with the baits on it.
Mm-hmm.
And the buyer, the owner, he'd say, "What's the name of it?" And I said, "McEwen spinnerbaits." So time passed. Bill, I sold some of them. They just put them on the rack, and we sold some of them. And I was over there cleaning ducks or skinning ducks, and Betty, Bill's wife, said, "I fried up some little crappie like that, fried them up. She could cook."
Mm-hmm.
And so we went in, sat down, ate a bite. Uh, I said, "Bill, you really need to think of a name for these lures and put them on a nice card with put a logo on it and
Mm-hmm.
put your rates up." He said, "Well, I really don't know. I don't know. I can't think of a good name." So we were sitting there, and a guy named Johnny Fowler, another good fisherman, on a lake that I was, shallow lake, Horseshoe Lake over in Arkansas. They had the cabin on it, both of them. And Johnny said, listen to the conversation. He said, "Bill's right. You need to come up with a name." And so I sat there and I said, "Can't be a Shannon twin spin. It could be I can't think of it." And I sat there a minute and I said, "Hey, what do bass do? What are bass doing when they hit a bait?" He said, "They're striking it." And I said, "There you go." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "They're striking it, aren't they?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Divide that word in half." And Johnny said, "That's exactly what I was thinking. Design it, cut it in half."
Yeah.
And Bill said, "Well, if you do that, you're going to have two names." I said, "So what, Bill?
Yeah.
We got to get a name for your baits." And we named it Strike King.
My buddy Bill and I got to take a quick break, and that will complete part one of the Buckmasters Outdoors podcast with my buddy Bill Dance. Stay tuned for part two.